I am so glad you convinced me that the family car should be the Defender 110. It is so beautiful inside. It's so comfortable, and it just feels indestructible.
Yes, it really is. I've been waiting a long time for the new model to come out. The Defender 110, I'm telling you, it's my favorite car of all times. It's my third one. You know, I have stories of going off-road. The guy managed the group. He was like, what are you doing in this beautiful car? I'm like, I'm going off-road. He's like, are you sure? Because you can use one of ours. And then they look like Mad Max cars. I'm like, no, we're going to do this. And he was shocked.
Wow. Well, it's great because the Defender has been reimagined for 21st century adventure, and its unparalleled off-road ability, as well as its robust interior, are invaluable whether you're headed towards uncharted territory or just a weekend of exploration. The Defender 110 tackles challenging surroundings with absolute confidence. The SUV conveys strength outside and in, featuring peerless technology like an intuitive driver display and an award-winning infotainment system. That's my favorite part, to keep you connected no matter where the journey takes you. Adventure is unique to everyone, and so is the Defender. Choose from the two-door Defender 90, the four-door Defender 110, or the larger Defender 130 with the ability to seat up to 8 passengers. You'll find uncompromising performance in all three. So pack up and go even further with the Defender 110. Learn more at LandRoverUSA.com/Defender.
Sometimes it takes a different approach to help you unlock your true potential. Capella University's game-changing FlexPath format helps you learn at your own pace and fit earning a degree into your life. From before you enroll to after you graduate, you'll be supported by people who are invested in your success so you can pursue your goals knowing that help is available if you need it. Imagine your future differently at capella.edu.
This isn't your average business podcast, and he's not your average host. This is the James Altucher Show. Today on the James Altucher Show.
It reminds me of the quote that worrying about tomorrow will never solve today's problems, but will only sap your strength from today. So it's very important, if you want to solve tomorrow's problems, to basically focus on where you are right now, to be calm and, like you say, mindful right now. But what I really want to get into is, how did you get into this? It seems almost sort of like, woo-woo, to go from being a congressman to getting into meditation and mindfulness and being the only one, really, who is this much out there into it. I mean, you wrote a book. It's widely received. So, again, sorry for interrupting.
Yeah, there was a moment in my political career that kind of accelerated and kind of realigned my spiritual journey, in a sense. In 2008, when I had been in Congress 5 or 6 years, I was extremely tired and I was getting to the point where I was going to be burnt out. So I went on this retreat that really jump-started my practice. To have a higher quality of life and better relationships, that's what's important.
This is James Altucher with another weekly podcast of the James Altucher Show. And I'm here with, I'm going to actually say he's a weird guest, which is saying a lot for this show. So I'm here with Congressman Tim Ryan. Congressman, welcome to the show.
Great to be with you.
And Congressman, the reason I introduced like that, I've had guests ranging from Dan Marino to Wayne Dyer to Tim Ferriss, Tucker Max. I've had all sorts of Arianna Huffington. And the reason why I think you're sort of a special guest is that when I say Dan Marino, what do you think?
Miami Dolphins.
Exactly. You got very specific. I think football. Okay. Yeah. Wayne Dyer, you think personal improvement. Arianna Huffington, you think the Huffington Post. But if I say Congressman Tim Ryan, I don't think necessarily the congressman who meditates. Like, there's sort of, you don't really think of that combination in Washington, D.C. Like, someone who actually takes time to think about what they're doing, because I'm taking a very superficial view of what mindfulness is. But why don't you define mindfulness, and then we'll talk about your book, and then I want to talk about how you got into this. So what is mindfulness?
I've adopted John Kabat-Zinn's definition of that mindfulness is paying attention on purpose to the present moment without judging. So being in trying to cultivate a sense of awareness of the present moment and not always taking your thoughts as absolute truths, and sometimes just seeing them as what they are, their thoughts, and you can let them go. You don't have to believe them. You don't have to chase them. And cultivating that kind of not only focus and concentration, but also more awareness of the present moment. And you mentioned Dan Marino and football, and this was one of the things that really drew me to the practice later in life, is that it reminded me of those moments I had as an athlete many, many years ago, and not as often as I wish they would have happened, but of being in the zone, that state of flow, that your mind and your body were in the same place at the same time. And recognizing, several years ago that you can actually train your mind to be in that place for the other aspects of your life, not just athletics, was very profound to me. And so that, to me, is what mindfulness is, cultivating that state of awareness of the present moment.
And so for instance, I write a lot about employment and the economic uncertainty that's happening in today's day and age. So someone maybe writes to me, like an example email from this weekend. Somebody just lost their job. They're very worried about the future. They're worried they're going to lose their house. They're worried they're going to lose their wife. They're worried they're going to lose their kids. So they're scared. And what does mindfulness do for a person like that?
Well, those are very difficult circumstances to try to stay present in, because they're so threatening to your well-being, your family, and everything that you really hold dear. And I'm glad you brought that up, because I go to a lot of conferences and I have a lot of friends, and I have some fun with the tech crowd out in San Francisco who they're looking into mindfulness, partially because they're stressed out, they're overworked, they're burned out, but they're doing really well. They're making a lot of money, they have a house, they have a car, they, in some ways are living at least the monetized version of the American dream. And I like to bring them back to the people in Youngstown, Ohio, or the people in Akron, Ohio, where I live and the people I represent, who have the very issue that you talked about. And I think mindfulness, kind of like athletics, except in a different sense, in those really difficult moments, really the best thing you can do for yourself and your family is to not come from a place of fear. And that's totally easier said than done. But if you're losing your job, you now have to start figuring out what to do next. And in order to really make those best decisions for the future is to be completely awake in the present moment, and maybe not be driven by your fears, but maybe see opportunity that may lie in there to get retrained and maybe get a better job, or to realign what you're doing with your family. I mean, I hate to even, it's difficult to talk about it because you don't ever want to diminish how difficult that is. But the best thing you can do is to be awake and aware in the present moment. And, guys from my line of work need to do a better job with dealing with inequality and having policies that don't promote inequality and bring about livable wages and good health care and all of that. So we've got our hands full too. But from a very personal situation, the best thing you can do is to be awake and aware in the present moment. And it is like that athlete. It's just like that athlete in a high-pressure situation when the chips are down. Who are the athletes we revere? It's the Dan Marinos of the world. It's the Joe Montanas of the world. It's the LeBron Jameses of the world, or, those people who can perform when there should be nothing but fear, and they turn it into gold somehow.
Well, it reminds me of the quote that worrying about tomorrow will never solve today's problems, but will only sap your strength from today. So it's very important, if you want to solve tomorrow's problems, to basically focus on where you are right now, to be calm and, like you say, mindful right now. But what I really want to get into is, how did you get into this? Like, where does you were a state senator, you worked for another congressman, you became a congressman. So you've been all your adult life in this kind of political arena, which is high stress, high intensity, extremely competitive, if not cutthroat. How did you get into this? It seems almost sort of like, woo-woo, to go from being a congressman to getting into meditation and mindfulness and being the only one really who is this much out there into it. I mean, you wrote a book, it's widely received. So again, sorry for interrupting.
Yeah, no, well, there was a moment in my political career that kind of accelerated and kind of realigned my spiritual journey in a sense. In 2008, when I had been in Congress 5 or 6 years, I was extremely tired, and I was getting to the point where I was going to be burnt out. I was 35
Why were you
years old.
tired?
Fundraising, campaigning. Ohio is a very busy political state. It goes back and forth, red and blue. And so, I was campaigning for friends of mine around the state, Sherrod Brown, who was running for senator, Ted Strickland, who was running for governor back in the day, and campaigning for other congressional candidates, the fundraising burden. And then I'm a Democrat. And then when we won the House back in 2006, I got on the Appropriations Committee, and that was a whole other, portfolio of busyness and work that I love and enjoyed, but it was adding up. And so I went on after the 2008 election, I thought, I don't want to be burnt out by the time I'm 40. So I knew the days where I meditated, that I was better. I was more focused, more relaxed, higher levels of energy, better.
So some days during this election process, you were taking the time to meditate. What were you doing?
I was doing some Wayne Dyer meditations that he had. I did some Deepak Chopra. I did some Christian centering prayer. So I did Vipassana, the one I do now mostly. All of those, mantra-based, TM style. I've tried them all, really.
You've done the whole smorgasbord. You've done the whole spectrum of meditations.
Pretty
but they're all basically go down to the same principles.
Well, I think there are differences, but they all have benefits, and to me it doesn't really matter which one you do if it's helping you, and have a higher quality of life and better relationships. That's what's important. So I went on this retreat that really jump-started my practice, because I would do it for a day and then not do it for 6 months. I'd do it for 2 days and then not do it for 3 months. And it was that kind of inconsistency. And I knew that I had to, if I was really going to have a daily practice, that I needed a retreat to kind of jump-start it. But, I go all the way back to growing up as a Catholic schoolboy, as an altar boy, as, someone who was, involved in the church. My family was very involved in the church. I went to Catholic school for 12 years. I really trace kind of the fundamental inquisitiveness about spiritual life and contemplation back to that. And I was very fortunate. I played football. I was quarterback and all that good stuff in Northeast Ohio, which is, a big deal back here. But I remember having coaches in my high school that I would watch as the bell rang for class in school, and I'd go one way and this coach would go the other way. And I remember every day seeing him step into the chapel to get some quiet time. And I remember going to church and walking down the aisle and seeing one of the legendary football coaches from the area sitting there praying the rosary. My grandfather prayed the rosary. And so I had people men that I looked up to that were coaches and teachers and athletes themselves, prioritize this as something that was important in their life. And so the more I get into this, the more I say, boy, I had a lot of people modeling for me that this was an okay thing to do and nothing to be ashamed of. And eventually when I discovered it in a very powerful way, I had the courage to go out and write a book about it and talk about it, even though I was a member of the United States Congress.
And the book's interesting because you talk a little bit about your personal experiences, but not so much. Instead, I think you I mean, you use scientific result after scientific result to show the benefits of mindfulness. Like, and what are some of those benefits?
Well, we talked a lot about stress, for example. There's a lot of science coming online about how this is a major stress reducer. Now, obviously, people who practice it know through their own personal experience how powerful it can be. But science is starting to come online and showing how that this can reduce stress and therefore and reduce inflammation in your body. And inflammation in your body causes a series of negative things. It could be both from a bad diet or stress, but in this instance, we talk about stress, and it causes heart disease, high blood pressure, ulcers, type 2 diabetes, on and on and on, because of high levels of stress. And mindfulness is being shown to reduce that level of stress and therefore signs of reducing inflammation, which is transformational when you're looking at our healthcare system. There was one study I talk about in the book where they had two groups that they had psoriasis, and they would each go into a light box for treatment. Each group would, but one group practiced mindfulness. I think it was for about 20 minutes while they were in the light box getting the treatment. And so the group that was practicing mindfulness needed 4 times less the treatments than the group that just went into the light box. And this seems to say that by reducing your stress, your body will do what it naturally wants to do, and that's heal itself. And so reducing your stress will allow it to do that better. And when you're coming from my vantage point in Congress and you're looking at the budget for our country over the long haul, the primary driver for our deficits is healthcare, both in Medicare and Medicaid. And so why wouldn't we want to try to adopt something that has no side effects, could reduce stress, and help drive down healthcare costs?
I wonder if some of it's related to the fact that, just physically, the gut and the heart have almost as many neurons or neurotransmitters in them as the brain. So when a lot of, mindfulness and meditation starts off with kind of deep breathing into the gut or diaphragm area, and I wonder if that helps. A lot of times when you're stressed first in your gut, which is why we refer to stress eating, or I have butterflies in my stomach, or I feel like, gut pains when I'm afraid of something. And so I wonder if mindfulness is related to kind of reconnecting all the parts of your brain so it flows a little more smoothly.
I think so. And, and that's why we've got to study it more. And I think that's why we've got to have more public awareness of it so we can say, okay, we have the National Institutes of Health. They are putting more money into this. But boy, if we could really ramp up and do a 10-year longitudinal study with, hundreds and hundreds of, if not thousands of people to really figure out, what's happening here and what can ultimately lead to us being as healthy and productive and happy as we possibly can be, seems to me that'd be a great investment for the United States government to make. The other thing, too, is the education. I mean, you see, really, if we're going to transform the country, it's going to start with, the kids that are coming up now. And there are education programs that are, whether it's the Mindful Schools program or different social and emotional learning programs like Inner Resiliency, or Goldie Hawn has a program called Mind Up. Phenomenal programs that are teaching kids in the elementary schools these basic skills that we think are so important, but we just don't teach our kids. We yell at our kids to pay attention, and trust me, I went to Catholic school, so that happened more than once. But we don't teach our kids how to pay attention. And really, mindfulness is the how of paying attention. And you cultivate that focus, that concentration, that awareness that's only going to improve the child's ability to learn. And then when you also look, and what's very interesting is the stress response, whether you're a child or you're in the Marine Corps, is the same. You have an older part of your brain called the amygdala. The amygdala gets really cranked up if you're in a stressful situation. That's where your fight or flight response is really coming from. And over time, whether you're serving 2 or 3 tours of duty in Iraq and Afghanistan, you can really start to shift your brain with all of that stress and trauma that can come from that tour of duty. And so mindfulness can help calm that part of your brain down. And when that part of your brain is really cranked up, almost prevents you from accessing different parts of your prefrontal cortex, the executive functions of your brain. It's kind of like the CEO of the brain. Working memory happens there, attention span, decision making, all of these happen in the prefrontal cortex. So high levels of stress prevent you from accessing your prefrontal cortex. So if you're a Marine, that can get very dangerous because now you're in fight or flight and you can't engage your prefrontal cortex, and you may end up making some decisions that you don't want to make and could have really global ramifications when you think about it today. Same for a kid, James, same exact thing for a kid. If a kid's living in a tough neighborhood, there's gangs, domestic violence in the home. We can say, this kid just can't learn, or we can say, well, what the science is telling us is this kid's having chronic levels of stress because of his environment. He probably has a bad diet too, but his amygdala is really cranked up. He can't access his prefrontal cortex, so he's never going to be able to learn. So what do we do to calm down his amygdala so that he can engage the executive parts of his brain that he's going to need to learn? And mindfulness is showing us that you can calm that part of your brain down they do belly breathing exercises, they do body awareness, body scan exercises, very simple stuff.
What's an example? Like, what's the simplest thing that a listener can try right now?
Well, the one they really start with a lot is the body scan. So you can lay in bed or sit in a chair and you just become aware of your feet. And then, you can get a guided a CD or a podcast or something of John Kabat-Zinn's, and he'll guide you through this. And then you become aware of your feet, and then you become aware of your ankles, and then your calves, and you take some deep breaths into that area, then to your knees, then to your thighs, and all the way up to the top of your head. And you take about 10 or 15 minutes to do this, but it starts to ground your focus, your awareness, into different areas, and your mind will go off from your feet, and you see that your mind went off from your feet, and you bring it back to your feet.
Don't get so disappointed if your mind drifts. It's a practice in bringing it back.
Well, you make the point that always needs to be made. So I'm glad you brought it up, because people always say, "Oh, I'm bad at this. I can't do it." Well, no one can when you first start. I mean, that's just the way it is. It's like when you go to the gym for the first day, you're not going to get on, the machine and start, lifting 225-pound bench press or whatever. You start and you cultivate your strength of your muscles. Same thing with your attention span. So your mind's inevitably going to go off a million different times. The key is to come back 1,000,001 time, and you'll start to see over time your ability to cultivate your attention span and have higher levels of attention. So if this is a fundamental aspect of learning, why aren't we teaching it to our kids at a very, very early age?
Well, that's a great question, because there is tons of studies, there's tons of programs that have been working. You're a congressman. Why aren't we kind of requiring our schools? Instead, we're requiring our schools to take these standardized tests and, answer multiple choice questions. What's the deal here?
Yeah, well, I think you're right to ask that, and this is not a dodge from the federal level. Most of these decisions are made at the state level, where they run the schools, and then the local district. But I think we should be, from the federal government side, I think promoting these kinds of programs that schools can maybe get a federal grant and start to implement it. There's some money in like the Safe and Drug-Free Schools account that does some of this stuff as a part of prevention. But it's a small, paltry amount of money when you think about what the needs actually are. And we got a grant a couple years ago for Youngstown and Warren City schools. And my whole goal was, the grant was $1 million. The whole goal was to say, we're not going to keep funding this from the federal level, but we want to have a proof of concept here. And in the local schools, they're doing extremely well, and they're starting to move local money from other programs into the program that we started, because this is so fundamental. These bullying programs haven't moved the needle in the last 4 or 5 years at all, because we're not getting to the root cause of these problems.
What are they trying to do right now, the bullying programs? Like, what's the idea?
Well, it's like, don't bully, or tell on the bully.
I see.
And I think this is so fundamental. It's like, what is going on in the child that's bullying? Like, what's going on? What's going on inside of them? What's going on in their family life? What's going on in their neighborhood? Why are they feeling this? And bullying's always been an issue, but today it's dangerous and it's gotten out of hand. And I think it's showing us how much anxiety these kids are living under. You know, they're either bullying or they find drugs and alcohol may be one, or they lack so much intimacy in their life that teen pregnancy is becoming an issue all across the country. You look at the anxiety, even in wealthy school districts, for getting proper test scores. And, oh, my God, if you don't get into Harvard or Yale, you're a complete loser. So they're taking Adderall and they're doing all kinds of drugs to stay up at night to make sure they make the grades. Like, what the hell are we doing to our kids? And the default position from many people is, well, put them on some drugs. You know, get them on some ADD medication or ADHD medication, or they're depressed or whatever. It's like, wait a minute. We're going to have a nation full of doped up kids. And the same thing with our vets. You know, they come back and it's like, well, these practices that I'm talking about, whether it's mindfulness-based stress reduction, or there's a program called Project Welcome Home Troops that does deep breathing exercises, and they do a power breath workshop, that are getting these vets off of their medication. These guys are sleeping through the night for the first time in years, and I talk to them all the time. And these are Vietnam vets that are in their 60s and sometimes 70 years old that all of a sudden discovered mindfulness-based stress reduction, and they're like, holy cow, I've waited 40 years for this. You know, and they feel obligated to tell the younger vets the same thing. We had a kid the other day, Billy Birdsell, who did several tours. He was on the front page of the Washington Post. He came to a meditation session that we have. He said they were pushing me down the road of getting on drugs, and I had some real issues with post-traumatic stress, but I wasn't going to go there. He developed his girlfriend's a yoga teacher. He developed yoga, Tai Chi, meditation, acupuncture. He kind of created his own little way of, and the kid's fine. He's so lighthearted, and he says, I got my life back. And the point is, like, the default position for America in 2014 and moving forward cannot be better living through pharmaceuticals. It just can't be, because we're going to have a nation full of kids who are just zombies, and same with our vets. And to me, that's unacceptable. We can do better than that.
So again, given these results, and these results are all over the place. They're not hidden. They're not just in your book. Like, I've read them in other places. Is it the pharma company that's lobbying against, kind of more exploration of this? Of what's happening that's preventing more exploration of this, and the FDA instead pushing more Adderall on everybody?
Well, I think it's just a lack of awareness. I really do. I don't think there's any big grand conspiracy. Obviously, the pharmaceutical companies are interested in making money, and
are they in your district? And
pushing their product. No, not really. I mean, obviously they sell in my district, but right. It's not a big industry here. But to me, it's this message just has to get out that this isn't fringe, this isn't woo woo. This is something that the Marine Corps is doing. This is something that Phil Jackson did with the Los Angeles Lakers and the Chicago Bulls to increase performance and concentration and focus and awareness and all the stuff we've been talking about. This is something that a lot of medical schools are starting to teach. In fact, I was down at the Ohio State University in Columbus a few weeks back. Their students, they have a couple students that actually want mindfulness-based stress reduction to be a course for first-year medical students. So the kids are starting to ask for this now. The students are starting to ask for this now. So what we've got to do is continue to raise awareness about this, and this is kind of why I wanted to write the book and celebrate the scientists and the people in the military and the vets and the schools that are doing this, to really say, hey, listen, I'm from Youngstown, Ohio. I mean, I'm not from L.A., I'm not from New York, I'm not from Vermont. I'm from Youngstown. I played football my whole life. That's what we do. We play sports. I represent steel mills and auto manufacturers and, normal America.
These days, we're all investors. trying to be smart with our money despite our worst impulses. But at iShares, we believe that deep down inside of every investor is a better investor. One that's just waiting to be let out. Explore iShares ETFs and insights and let your best investor out. Visit iShares.com for more information.
You know what I love about fantasy sports is that even though I'm not going to be a great basketball player or a baseball player or a football player or whatever, I feel like I get to participate and make decisions and use my knowledge of these different leagues or these different sports to compete. So it's like I can pick my team or I can pick my favorite players and I could use my knowledge to make predictions and maybe even make money. So with the basketball season here, you can now pick combo projections across football and basketball from the Specials League on Prize Picks. This is a league created specifically for combo projections that include two or more players from different sports or leagues. Want to play alongside some of Prize Picks' favorite players like rapper Meek Mill and comedian Andrew Schultz, who's also been a guest on this podcast, and I've been a guest on his? You can now find community plays under the promos tab of the app to view entries for some of the biggest names in the Prize Picks community each week. Look, Prize Picks even offers a reboot policy so that your entries stay in play even if one of your players gets injured. For football and basketball games, if you have a player who exits the game in the first half and does not return in the second, that player is rebooted. Prize Picks is the only daily fantasy sports platform with an injury insurance policy. What? So I love playing it. I love anywhere where I can use analytical ability with my interests to demonstrate some skill and maybe make some money. And I like the game-like aspect. I do wish they had chess as a category on prizepicks.com, but I'll settle for what they've got. Maybe I should make my own fantasy chess league. But in any case, I love Prize Picks. Go to prizepicks.com/James. Use code James for a first deposit match up to $100. That's the easiest $100 you're ever going to make. So that's prizepicks.com/James and use code James. Daily fantasy sports made easy. The future of learning is definitely online. Like, it's such BS that you have to spend $200,000 or take $200,000 in loans and go to some fancy school when it's useless. It doesn't guarantee you a job. Most employers, including me, do not care about degrees or grades or anything like that. We want to care that you love what you're doing, that you know what you're doing, in some cases that you have experience or that you're willing to learn. But people in general love learning and are curious. Like, the key to success is curiosity. And I think masterclass.com is the perfect model for online learning. I'm really happy they're sponsoring this episode. If you're going to give a gift, give the gift of learning. Masterclass makes a meaningful gift this season for you and anyone on your list, because both of you can learn from the best to become your best, from leadership to effective communication to cooking. Let me tell you some of the classes I've taken. I've taken comedy from Steve Martin. I mean, can you believe I can take a class from Steve Martin on comedy, or Judd Apatow, my favorite comedy director? I could take an actual class from him on writing. Wolfgang Puck on cooking. Dan Brown on writing, or Judy Bloom, who's been on this podcast, on writing. By the way, Wolfgang Puck also has been on this podcast. It's such a pleasure. I try to take classes all the time from masterclass.com. And whether you're watching Masterclass on TV or listening in audio mode in the app or on their site, the quality speaks for itself. It's like these Masterclass instructors are your own personal mentors that are going to help you reach the next level. How much would it cost to take one-on-one classes on comedy from Steve Martin or on chess from Gary Kasparov? You just wouldn't be able to do it. But it would cost hundreds of thousands of dollars. With a Masterclass annual membership, it's $10 a month. Memberships start at $120 a year for unlimited access to one-on-one classes with all 180 plus Masterclass instructors. So it's not just $120 for one instructor. You get all 180 plus Masterclass instructors. boost your confidence, and find practical takeaways you can apply to your life and at work. And if you own a business or are a team leader, use Masterclass to empower and create future-ready employees and leaders. That's the real education in today's world. So this holiday season, you can give one annual membership and get one free at masterclass.com/JAS. JAS, of course, stands for the James Altucher Show. So right now you can get 2 memberships for the price of one at masterclass.com/JAS. Masterclass.com/JAS. Offer terms apply.
You're kind of like in ground zero of what's happening in the American economy right now, with essentially, not only global outsourcing, but technology outsourcing and just the general retrofitting of the economy to use less employees. So Youngstown's kind of the center of a 100-year industrial revolution that's coming to an end. And what do you see happening economically in this industrial belt right now?
Well, we've got some real positive signs too. The president is starting the beginning workings of about 15 of these manufacturing innovation institutes. The first one a couple years ago was put in Youngstown, Ohio, and they're doing additive manufacturing, 3-dimensional printing. A bunch of corporations are here who do manufacturing for the military, the energy sector, and other areas. They're all here in Youngstown now, so there's a great opportunity there. There's business software incubator we have in Youngstown that the average wage is about $58,000 a year. There's only 300 employees there, but it's a growth area for us. I was just out in Akron the other day. We've got a business accelerator out there, and I think the average wage out there is into the $60,000 a year as well. I think there's a variety of things that we need to do. One of the issues is coding, is teaching kids how to code. There's one coder for every 3 jobs that are available, almost the exact opposite of the rest of the country where there's 3 people looking for every 1 job. So there's thousands of coders that are needed with just about a year's worth of training. And there's some great programs like Yes We Code, and there's Women Who Code out of New York, where we can get kids trained up in coding. I think we do need to make some public investments into our roads, our bridges, our infrastructure, our airports, our combined sewers. These are public investments that need to get made and will put people to work. And if you work in the building trades here in Ohio, you make a decent buck. You make probably $20 an hour, $25 an hour. Those are a lot of projects there that need to get done. But ultimately, I think another area is food. I think we need to focus more on regional, sustainable farming where you can keep food local and grow and nurture the local food supply chain, and keep money in these different regions and get away from these monoculture and monocrops and all of these things. So there's a food component of it as well. And ultimately, I think what we have to do is we're in the beginning of creating a new economy. I mean, we just have to. The old economy is on the way out, and the new economy is yet to be created. And I think ultimately what we need to do is make sure that our students, that we obviously do put money into research and development through the Department of Energy and Department of Defense and NIH and National Science Foundation. I think we really need to ramp that up. We need to get kids in our schools that are focused, aware, get these programs in our schools, social and emotionally literate. But this also brings about creativity and your ability to tap into your own creativity. And that's going to help us as we move forward. But we also, in order to stimulate that creativity, we need to get these kids excited about math and science as well, with Legos in the elementary schools and with robotics in the grade schools and, STEM colleges in our universities, and really see, okay, let's unleash it. I can't tell you what the economy is going to look like in 10 years. I don't think anybody can, but I do know if we give the kids the skills we talked about with the social and emotional learning and the mindfulness and everything that brings to bear, we get them excited about being creative, and that means music and art in our schools, and really get the creative juices flowing, teaching them how to work in teams moving forward, and getting, like I said, Legos and robotics, and getting them excited in these kind of things. They'll go out into the world and they want to make change. They're environmentally conscious, so that there can be a whole new design movement for how we start designing our products that, can be placed back in the earth at the end of their life cycle without doing a whole lot of damage. I was at a company yesterday, and now you got me going because I love economic development, but I was in a company in Akron the other day. They're pulling all the plastic out of landfills, and they're converting it into oil, the oil that was in the plastics, and they're reducing the garbage that's going in the landfills, and reducing landfills by tons, billions of tons of plastics.
Now, are there regulations like on what to do with landfills? For instance, there's a lot of natural gases that landfills, exude. So are there things you can and can't do with landfills?
Well, yeah, I think methane too is a big issue coming out of landfills. Yeah, you do have to be careful. You do have to be careful.
But like methane's something that, for instance, can be recycled into energy, and I think that's one of the things that you're not allowed to use with landfills. Like a lot of this is sort of kind of held back by regulation for some reason.
I agree, and I think that's what I'm talking about when there's a new economy, and just because you may be a Democrat and the old way of, or environmentalist, and the old way of doing it was, hey, we better regulate these landfills. Well, let's maybe set up some pilot projects with some companies who know how to take the methane out of the landfill and recycle it and put it to a little more productive use.
I mean, would you say, for instance, can you think of an example where sort of taking a step back, being mindful, being meditative has put you at odds with, let's say, the Democratic leadership in terms of just blindly following, whatever the leadership tells you? And I'm saying this whether you're a Democrat or a Republican.
Yeah, I think so. I think it's, it's allowed me to think for myself and really see, not be blinded by, oh, well, this is my party, I should be with them, or that makes sense to me, and I'm not even going to think about it.
Well, what's an example? Like, what's a profile in courage that the mindfulness has given you?
Well, I would say, the other day we had a vote on the research and development tax credit, and the Democrats were against it, and it was not paid for. And a lot of times now the Republicans won't do anything because it's not paid for. And which I think in the long term is not necessarily a bad strategy, but they won't even find a way to pay for unemployment insurance to extend it. And I'm for extending unemployment insurance, even though right now we don't have the revenue to pay for it because I think the social value is there. But anyway, Democrats were against the research and development tax credit because it wasn't paid for, and they were whipping Democrats to vote against it. And I voted for it because I think if there's one thing we can do for our economy today is give some certainty to these businesses who are doing the research and development and commercialization of products that are going to lead to job growth in our country. And I recognize it's not paid for today, and maybe we have to come back and figure out a way to do it. But I think that is something that we need to do. So that was my belief, and I see it happening in my district. I see the businesses that are growing are ones using or could potentially use this research and development tax credit. So I voted against the party on that because I felt like they were wrong.
And what happens? Like, does when you vote against a vote like that, does like Frank Underwood suddenly call you and start yelling at you? Like, start.
Yeah, I stay out of the train station. You know what I mean with Frank. No, I mean, people get upset with you, and but there's always another vote at another time. So whatever. I think I've been around long enough now. I've been in Congress 12 years that when I disagree with the House leadership, I vote my conscience, and I say I want to do the different direction. And I would hope that at some point I could help persuade people to say, hey, no, this is something we talk about research and development. We should be for the research and development tax credit. So that's one example. But with the real benefit that I've noticed from my vantage point here is really you begin to see how things are really interconnected. We have for so long kept this industrial age mentality where okay, here's the Department of Agriculture, here's the Department of Education, here's the Department of this and that. And in reality, these are all connected. We just had a huge discussion of a farm bill in the United States. All our ag policies are now set in stone for the next 5 years. There was no discussion about diabetes. There was no discussion that in the next few years, half of our country is going to either have diabetes or pre-diabetes. There was no discussion about the obesity epidemic, and it's like, well, guys, food is a huge component of health. Even when we went through the whole healthcare debate, we weren't talking about food.
Now, why do you think the two concepts weren't linked? Are you think people are thinking still in a kind of a poverty mindset, like, well, we have to feed people first?
Yeah, I think that's part of it, and part of it is just, again, a certain inertia builds up around issues that it just becomes so difficult to face and to shift. But how can we sit here and think that we can eat fake food ad infinitum, indefinitely, and it's not going to affect our health? And we're watching the numbers continue to increase with, like I said, with diabetes and pre-diabetes and obesity, and we're seeing what's happening to our children. We're reading articles about all of these antibiotics that are in our chickens, in the poultry that we eat, huge levels to where we're becoming resistant to certain antibiotics, which could be a hell of an issue for us as a country. You're looking at the hormones that we put in our meat, and the fact that cows are even eating corn when they're designed to eat grass. They've developed this chamber in their belly to digest grass, and it's actually healthy for you.
So would you say that, like you described earlier, studies show how mindfulness almost, let's say, it relaxes the amygdala, so there's more communication with the prefrontal cortex, which is like the CEO of the brain, as you described it. Would you say that kind of practicing those connections and making those connections run more smoothly allows you as a congressman to more easily start making these connections between the different concepts being voted on and argued and debated and so on?
Yeah, definitely. You see it clearly. You see the connections, and it really does look awfully foolish, but I think it's not, I think moms get this, I think there are mothers who do the grocery shopping and who, watch their kids grow up and see them in schools that are saying, gee, something just isn't right here. Like, how can we keep going down this road? And it's not Democratic or Republican. It's like living. If you're alive and paying attention and watching your kids, I think, for me, stepping into this void and talking about it can really have a powerful impact. And my goal is how do we mobilize these moms? How do we mobilize the country?
Did you get pushback at all? Like, I saw one reference on Google. Somebody called you Congressman Moonbeam, almost like reference to Jerry Brown in California in the 70s, because I think he was referred to the same way. Like, did you get pushback when you wrote this book that you're thinking of issues not important to the district, or this guy's crazy, or what was sort of the response from constituents in your district when you wrote this book?
I think most people don't necessarily know exactly what this is, but they see me out at the schools and they hear what the teachers are saying about it, and so they leave with a very positive impression that I'm doing something good for the schools, because even the teachers are saying how much it's benefiting the kids, and most people don't really pay that much attention to every little thing that's going on. But in my district especially, I'm so involved with all of the other things that we were talking about, the Additive Manufacturing Institute and bringing money back for educational programs, and just, I'm just really involved in a lot of the economic development that's happening in the community. And, when I talk about this, I don't talk about, whatever. I talk about the science. I talk about Phil Jackson. I talk about the Seattle Seahawks, who had a whole mindfulness-based program this year. And an amazing sports psychologist that's working with them. And it's like, I tell my guys who like to give me a hard time, I'm like, the Seattle Seahawks won the Super Bowl. They weren't laying on the field against the Broncos in like Savasana pose doing a body scan. They were in the game. They were playing, but they were focused and aware. And obviously it worked because they were in the present moment and paying attention to what was happening around them and had a high level of focus and concentration. And, so this is not about you sit on a cushion or you go to a yoga studio and then you get off the mat or off the cushion or off of your chair and you go back to, life. No, this is about taking that awareness off of the practice, off of the cushion and into your life so that, when your wife, talks to you, you're paying attention. When your kids are there, you're present for the kids. Because that's what they do. They just feel you most of the time. The kids, they just feel whether or not you are present with them. You bring that to those daily situations. And I just think if we all brought just a little bit more, just if we were just a little bit less stressed, if we were just going a little bit less crazy, if the treadmill was just going a little bit slower, that our country would shift in really dramatic ways.
I totally agree with that. So let me ask you this. What do you worry about? Like you have an election coming up. Every 2 years you have an election coming up. Do you get stressed about that you might not win? Do you have anybody even running against you? Like you've been there 12 years, so it's a pretty easy layup, right?
Yeah, we've got a good district, and I've been around it, like I said, for 12 years and know most people in the district, and so we do okay, and it's a strong Democratic district as well. So we just got out of a Democratic primary where we had someone run against me, and we got about 85% of the vote.
Who would run against you? Like, what do they say?
They had a personal issue of a local crime that was committed that they wanted me to look into, and they felt like I didn't do enough to look into it.
What was the issue?
Some policeman shot somebody, and it went through the entire court. It went to trial and all of that stuff, and the cop was found innocent. And there's nothing I can do really from the legislative perspective. It's kind of that goes through the judicial branch, but that's why he ran, and that was the reason. And and we did well, so it was good. And but you always worry. I mean, this is another thing that I think is important to point out when you're talking about, the practice of mindfulness. It doesn't make all your problems go away. You still have fear. You still get nervous. You still worry you may lose your job or your kids or, something may happen. And my wife now, she's pregnant. So, you worry about the baby and,
congratulations.
Everything. Thank you. But these are things you're concerned about. Is the baby moving? Is the baby not moving? How's my wife feel? And what this does is I think it helps you come into better relationship with all of those things, and it doesn't mean that it's, soft or, squishy, but it's like, are you going to let these negative thoughts overrun your life so that you're in a bad mood so that when your wife needs you to be there for her, you're, a little bit, edgy and irritable? And is that going to make the situation better or worse? Or can you develop a skill set that allows you to see those negative thoughts, see those fears, and kind of just, breathe through them and let them pass like the clouds in the sky? And that's ultimately a skill that you can learn. And it's the same with those kids in the schools. Are we going to teach those kids the fundamental skills of, oh my God, I'm angry and I want to punch this kid right in the face, but I learned these breathing exercises and these techniques, it's going to pass. My amygdala is a little cranked up right now. Let me take a few deep breaths, and then let it go. And this is what they teach them at the school, James. This is exactly what they teach them. I was there the other day, and this girl was talking about how she had a little tiff with this other girl in the lunch line or in the breakfast line. And she said, it was so amazing to think how aware she was of her own feelings. And she said, we're just not getting along right now. And the teacher said, would you like to make an invitation to her? And she said, yes. And the two girls got up and they went into a side of the classroom where they have what's called a peace corner. And the two kids went to the peace corner. They didn't disrupt the class. They didn't push each other. They didn't get in a fight. They went to this peace corner. They talked it out. They did a little coloring together, and they came back to the classroom. Now that is education.
That definitely is, and I wish my kids are taught this at their school, but unfortunately they're not. Unfortunately, you see this everywhere: veterans hospitals, schools, factories that are closing down, Silicon Valley. It's not. I strongly believe these are skills that should be taught, and it's great that someone in Congress is being aware of this and hopefully spreading this to your fellow congressmen and congresswomen. Now, what do you do the rest of the day? What's the day like for a congressman?
Well, I'm going to get in the car. I'm going to play with the dogs for a couple minutes, and then I'm going to get in the car and I'm going to drive to D.C. I'm in Eastern Ohio, so it's about a 5-hour drive.
So not horrible. Better than flying.
Yeah, I go back and forth, but I get tired of flying sometimes. And so I drive for a while, and then I get tired of driving, and I'll fly for a little while. But I want to have my car down there because my wife's due in the next 2-3 weeks, and I just don't know when it's going to come. So I want to have the car in town in case I got to, get in it and get back here in case there's not a flight. So I'm going to drive for a little bit, and then we have a quiet time caucus that we do every week, where at 6:00 tonight we go into the House Chapel, which is right in the Capitol, under the Capitol Dome. And every member is invited for 30 minutes to come into the Quiet Time Caucus. And you can meditate, you can pray the rosary, you can have quiet time.
How many members are showing up?
Yeah, just me and really one other guy.
Hey, it's a start.
We're holding the space, and we do that tonight. And then we got votes at 6:30, and then I've got an event tonight for the New Leadership Council. That's a big organization for new leaders. And then one other thing we do that you may find interesting, every week we do a session with staff members, where we've been getting about 30 or 40 staff members come, and we have different meditation teachers come in. Teachers that are doing work with veterans, doing work in the schools, doing work in hospitals, education, the military. They come and they'll do about a half-hour guided meditation session for staffers, and these staffers are great. They're really enjoying it. They're seeing the benefits of it, and they're learning all the different applications. So to me, that's almost more important than the members of Congress. And to have 30 or 40 staffers there that are interested in this kind of thing is really cool. It's really something that says, maybe there is a little shift happening here.
Well, Congressman Tim Ryan, author of A Mindful Nation, How a Simple Practice Can Help Us Reduce Stress, Improve Performance, and Recapture the American Spirit. Thank you so much for coming on to my podcast, and I really appreciate the time. I know you're a busy guy.
Well, thank you. I think it's really important that guys like you find value in this and want to help get the word out, because the moms in the school districts, the people on the school boards and the teachers, the more they hear about this, they can start this in their own classroom. And in the back of A Mindful Nation, there's a resource section of different organizations that are doing this work. And so any of your listeners can go and get the book and get into the resource section and get some direction on how to implement this in your own communities. It's a very decentralized movement, and we need everybody's help to get it rolling.
Also, I will say in the back of the book, there's some sample exercises of different paths and different traditions on how you can practice mindfulness. So I recommend that as well.
I appreciate that, James. Thank you so much for doing this.
Thanks, Congressman. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.
AI might be the most important new computer technology ever. It's storming every industry, and literally billions of dollars are being invested. So buckle up. The problem is that AI needs a lot of speed and processing power, so how do you compete without costs spiraling out of control? It's time to upgrade to the next generation of the cloud, Oracle Cloud Infrastructure, or OCI. OCI is a single platform for your infrastructure, database, application development, and AI needs. OCI has 4 to 8 times the bandwidth of other clouds, offers one consistent price instead of variable regional pricing, and of course, nobody does data better than Oracle. So now you can train your AI models at twice the speed and less than half the cost of other clouds. If you want to do more and spend less, like Uber, 8x8, and Databricks Mosaic, take a free test drive of OCI at oracle.com/advance. That's oracle.com/advance. oracle.com/advance.